The first thing I heard was the splash, an unmistakable plop that echoed across Hemlock Lake. I looked up from my fishing pole, barefoot on the dock, to see something shiny and heavy hit the water. My heart skipped. I ran outside, heart pounding, and saw it. A new wrought iron gate, gleaming under the sun like some smug monument to absurdity. Behind it, a shiny silver plaque read, "Private HOA access only. Violators will be prosecuted." My stomach sank. My dock, my lake, my property, completely blocked off. It was like I'd become a trespasser in my own backyard, and right there, blinking with a robotic red light, was a security camera pointed straight at me, as if mocking me with a digital middle finger. That's when I knew. Something stupidly sinister was happening. Her name was Jack Roosh. I'd soon learn she was the one behind this mess. Jack lived just down the lake in a big house with a manicured lawn. But Jack wasn't just any neighbor. She was the president of the Hemlock Shores HOA, and apparently, she had decided I was a problem. Stared at the gate, the black steel bars stretching out like some dystopian train track. Who installs a fence around someone else's lake access without knocking, without asking? Later that day, Jack sauntered up my gravel path, clipboard in hand, wearing a stiff lavender blouse and sandals that looked way too ambitious for gravel. Her face was all tight smiles like she was presenting a prize on a game show. "Hello there," Jack said, voice sweet but sharp. "We've installed a protective barrier around the lake. Strictly for residents within the HOA, you understand. Liability concerns." "Liability for what?" I shot back, fists clenched. Jack chuckled a little too cheerfully. "Technically, the access strip sits on land now maintained by the Hemlock Shores HOA. You must have missed the notices we sent several times." I blinked. "Notices?" "I didn't get a single one. And how did you even get permission to build this? That land's not part of your HOA." She smiled, that tight-lipped smile again. "Oh, but it is now. The HOA acquired the lease last fall. It was previously managed by the old bait shop owner, bless his soul, who passed away. Since then, it reverted to open bid, and we secured it. We've redesignated it as common HOA property." I stared, trying to process her words. That tiny strip of land, the old bait shop, had always been part of my deed, or so I thought. Turns out it wasn't. Jack had slipped in and grabbed it, like a hawk snatching a rabbit. "So, you're telling me," I said, voice rising, "you've fenced off my access without knocking on my door, and now you're claiming it as HOA property?" Jack's grin widened. "I suggest you submit a formal appeal if you feel differently. But as a non-member, I'm afraid you don't have voting rights." I felt my blood boil. I owned the land, every inch of it. And now they'd just taken it? The next morning, I grabbed my bolt cutters ready to cut through the fence. Just a quick snip, I thought. I'd be back in my peaceful lake again. But as I got close, Jack appeared with a security guard calling the sheriff. The deputy looked at the property maps, confused. "You own the cabin and surrounding land, but this parcel," he pointed to the gate, "is under lease to the Yao." "Cho?" I shook my head, stunned. This isn't right. I paid for this land in full, no mortgage, no liens. Jack watched, her eyes cold. "Well, technically," she started. I cut her off. "No, you're wrong. I own the land. The fence is on my property, and I'm not leaving." That afternoon, a warning sign went up. "Do not trespass. $1,000 fine." The blinking camera kept watching me, blinking like a taunt. I tried to attend an HOA meeting. It was like walking into a soap opera run by suburban villains. Everyone was either terrified of Jack or hypnotized by her delusions. One guy whispered, "You're not on the lake list anymore." A lake list? I'd never heard of it. Then Jack had the only key to the gate. For days I felt powerless. I even considered building a floating dock, launching kayaks, anything to make a point. But then I noticed something, a "for sale" sign on the parcel next to the gate. I called the real estate agent. The seller was an elderly woman in Alaska who'd inherited the land from her late husband and forgotten it even existed. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the faint glow of the gate under the moon. I smiled. If Jack wanted control, she was about to get it. Next week, the paperwork was done. The deed was mine. I owned that narrow strip of land, including the gate Jack had so proudly installed, and here's the twist. I didn't do anything dramatic. I waited. A week later, I replaced the lock with a heavy-duty padlock and a simple sign. Private property, access by owner permission only. Then I watched Jack arrive at the HOA summer brunch, smiling smugly, clutching her clipboard. She reached for her key. Nothing. She jiggled and twisted, growing redder and more frantic. Finally, she announced, "There's a technical issue with the lock. It'll be resolved soon." I sat back, lemonade in hand, waiting. When she looked up and saw me waving, I tossed her a copy of the deed. Her face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon rind. "You can't just buy community property," she stammered. "Oh, I didn't," I said calmly. "I bought my property, the land your gate is standing on, including this little stretch all the way to that big rock." Her eyes widened as she looked again at the deed, highlighted in neon yellow. Suddenly, her smug smile faded. "That's impossible," she whispered. I leaned against the fence, voice steady. "It's not. And now, I own the soil under that gate." Her jaw worked, but no words came. I watched her turn speechless and walk away, her phone glued to her ear. No screaming, no tantrum, just a quiet exit like a villain retreating from a battle she thought she'd win. And that was just the beginning. The gate still stood firmly closed, but I could see the fire burning in Jack's eyes as she fumbled with the key one last time. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably, twisting and turning, trying desperately to force the stubborn lock open. Her face, usually so confident and smug, had contorted into a mixture of frustration, anger, and perhaps a dash of panic. Her brow furrowed deeply as she jiggled the key, then slammed her palm against the gate in exasperation. She cursed softly under her breath, her voice barely more than a whisper, but her movements betrayed her rising anger. Her heels clicked sharply on the gravel as she took a step back, then spun around and headed toward her car with a scowl etched deep into her face. Her shoulders were tense, and her steps were hurried, like she was trying to escape her own embarrassment, yet her eyes flickered with a dangerous glint of determination. I didn't immediately move. I stayed rooted to the spot, watching her retreating figure, heart pounding loudly in my chest. My eyes lingered on her hand, the same hand that had been so confident earlier, now clutching her phone. I saw her raise it, and I knew what she was doing. Her thumb pressed record and her phone's camera was pointed directly at the lock, capturing her own failure for all to see. That smug expression she'd worn earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating look, like she was already planning her next move, already knowing she wouldn't accept defeat so easily. In that moment, I pulled out my own phone and quickly snapped a picture of her. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't resist. I sent the image to my email with a simple message: "Game over." It felt good, a little victorious, but I knew better than to believe this was the end. Jack was clever, relentless, and she didn't give up easily. She thrived on control, on power, and on making sure everyone knew she was in charge. As she stormed into her car, her heels pounding the gravel as she sped away, I moved closer to the gate. I reached out and gently pushed it open with one hand, and it swung wide with a soft, almost respectful creak. Behind it, the lake stretched out in all its tranquil beauty, its surface shimmering under the golden rays of the setting sun, waves lapping lazily against the weathered wood of the dock. Everything looked peaceful, serene even, but I knew better. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool, crisp air. The silence around me was almost deafening, except for the gentle hum of insects and the distant call of a lone bird. It was a quiet that felt unnatural, like the calm before an inevitable storm. I knew Jack wasn't done. Not yet. This was just a temporary lull, a moment of respite before she regrouped and launched her next attack. I strolled down the dock, fishing pole in hand, and sat in my favorite chair, facing the water, watching the ripples spread outward from the boat slips. I let the peaceful surroundings wash over me, but beneath that calm a storm was brewing. I kept my eyes on the horizon, aware that Jack was probably somewhere nearby, maybe hiding behind the trees, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike, again. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long orange streaks across the sky. The lake's surface reflected the fiery colors, turning into a mirror of the sunset's brilliance. But I knew this wasn't a moment to relax. I had to stay alert. Jack was unpredictable. I'd seen her fury firsthand. I knew her stubbornness, and I knew her capacity for scheming, for plotting, for trying to outsmart anyone who stood in her way. Suddenly, my phone buzzed sharply in my pocket, startling me. I pulled it out and saw a new message, a text from an unknown number. It read, "You think this is over? Watch your back." A cold shiver ran down my spine. The message was clear. Jack wasn't finished. She was angry, maybe even desperate. Her silence earlier had been a warning sign. Now she was making her move, trying to remind me that I'd only bought myself a temporary victory. I looked out over the lake again, at the gate, then beyond to the horizon. I knew deep down that this was just the beginning, not the end. Jack's pride wouldn't let her accept defeat, and I doubted she'd give up her pursuit of control so easily. I leaned back in my chair, eyes narrowing as I watched the fading sunlight turn the sky a deep crimson. The peaceful scenery around me was deceptive. There was a war raging beneath the surface, a battle of wills that was far from over. For now, I had won the battle of the gate, but the war for Hemlock Lake's control was still unresolved, and I had a feeling I'd be the one standing when it was all said and done. Jack was clever, relentless, and dangerous. She'd come back, I was sure of it. And when she did, I would be ready, because I knew her tactics, her tricks, her manipulations, her silent threats. And I knew I had something she didn't, something she'd never understand: patience. As I sat there, staring into the darkening sky, I realized that the real game was just beginning. Jack's fury had been unleashed, and she would stop at nothing to get her way. But so would I. The night was falling now, wrapping everything in shadows, and I knew that the next chapter of this story would be far longer, far more dangerous, and much more unpredictable than anything that had come before. But one thing was certain: I wouldn't back down. I was ready to fight for what was mine, and I was prepared for whatever she threw at me next. Because in this game of power, it was survival of the fittest, and I intended to be the last one standing. The night exploded into chaos as Jack's scream pierced the air, sharp and filled with rage. I barely had time to react before she lunged at me, her eyes wild with fury. The knife in her hand gleamed under the moonlight, trembling as she advanced, relentless. I dodged just in time, feeling the cold steel graze past my arm. Blood trickled down, but I ignored it, adrenaline surging through my veins. "You can't win," she hissed, voice trembling with desperation. "This isn't over. Not yet." Her face twisted with madness, and she swung again. I grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. She struggled, but I held firm, knowing this was the moment I had to end it. Suddenly, her phone buzzed loudly in her pocket. She hesitated, eyes flickering with confusion and fear. I saw the screen light up, an unknown number flashing ominously. Her grip on the knife faltered. "Answer it," I demanded, voice low but commanding. She froze, then reluctantly pulled out her phone. As she answered, a deep, distorted voice echoed through the line. "Did you really think you could hide forever? The game isn't over yet." Her face went pale. She looked at me, trembling, realizing she'd been caught in a trap she hadn't seen coming. Before I could say a word, a loud crash sounded behind us. I turned sharply. There, emerging from the shadows, was someone I never expected to see. It was my sister, Sarah, holding a gun, her expression cold and determined. "Drop the knife," she commanded, voice unwavering. "This ends now." Jack's eyes widened in shock. "You? You betrayed me." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. "You've caused enough damage. It's over." In that split second, Jack's mind raced. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you've won? This isn't just about me, it's about everything, about the truth you're too scared to face. She suddenly lunged forward, knocking Sarah's gun aside, but before she could strike again, I grabbed her from behind, pulling her back. We struggled desperately, the night echoing with our heavy breathing and the clash of wills. Then, a flash of movement, something sharp and fast, pierced the darkness. Jack's scream shattered the night as a shot rang out. Time slowed. I watched her fall, clutching her side, eyes wide with shock and pain. The gun fell from Sarah's hand. Silence settled, thick and suffocating. Jack's face twisted with agony and defiance. "Why?" I managed to choke out, voice trembling. She looked up at me, blood streaming down her face. "Because I was never about power. I was about the truth. And now, everyone will know." Her last breath escaped her lips, and she went still. The night's shadows wrapped around us as I stared down at her lifeless body. The truth? It was buried deep now, hidden in the darkness, but what came next would change everything, forever. Because I realized as I looked at her lifeless form that the real battle was just beginning. The game wasn't over, not even close, and the shadows of that night would haunt me for the rest of my life. Suddenly my phone buzzed again. I hesitated, then looked. A message from an unknown number. "You think it's over? Think again." A cold mist crept over me. The real nightmare had just begun.